Thank you for being here in this space at the Atchin Tan in Glastonbury, taking this time to listen to us chat. I'm Liza Mortimer, I work for Travellers Times, and I'm going to be interviewing the incredible, the unique, international, contemporary, multidisciplinary artist, Delaine Le Bas.
Thank you.
Delaine, do you want to tell everyone a bit about what you do?
Well, thank you everyone for coming on a Sunday morning at 12:30 in Glastonbury. That's quite an achievement in itself. I work cross-practice. I studied textiles at a very small college on the south coast in Worthing. There's some friends here from there today. And then I went to St Martin's School of Art. I was at St Martin's 1986 to 1988, so that gives you an idea of how long I've been doing what I do, which is some decades now. So I did fashion and textiles at St Martin's, but even when I was there, I sort of decided to do other things. I work predominantly with textiles, but use photography, filmmaking, performance, and create very big installations.
Yes, and these big installations have had great momentum and engagement, so much so that recently Delaine Le Bas has been nominated for the Turner Prize Award.
Thank you.
This is for her work Incipit Vita Nova, and it's really interesting talking to Delaine today because the first time I came across Delaine's work was when I was doing a master's at Montfort University in Leicester, and my master's was a first chance for me to actually see how my Romany heritage could influence my creative practice, which was predominantly coming from a dance background. So the librarian took me to a very small section in the university library of influences from Romany artists and their work, and sure enough, the first book I pull out and the first page I turned to was Delaine's work called Gypsy Water. And straight away, when I looking at that page and looking at the photography, you could see that you use quite a lot of different materials. It was a representation of art that did not fit the traditional symbols that you see in Romany culture, at least at first glance. And I learned more and more about Delaine as I'm reading this book, and inspired a lot of my creative practice. So I'd like to ask you about why you have involved multimedias in your work, and what sort of decisions you make in selecting materials and objects to represent each exhibition that you've shown.
Well, I think it's really important for me anyway, with my work, that many people can access what it is I do. So therefore, I think that the personal, and this is a quote from Octavia Butler as well, that I heard someone else referencing, but it's very true, that the personal can be universal. So the idea of using various means to be able to do that, and using multimedia, I think, is one way, and also creating installations is another, because it enables people to be completely immersed in something. So I just don't create the installation. There's usually video. I work with someone who works with me on the film. My son used to work previously with me on the film, but I now work with Laszlo Farkas, who's originally from Hungary, but who's now based in Berlin. And I work with soundscapes with Justin Langlands, who I've worked with for, that'll be going on for probably nearly 20 years soon. So the idea is to create these immersive environments. In Sepit Vita Nova, for example, it was at Secession in Vienna. I don't know if anyone knows the building at all in Vienna, the Secessionist building. I wasn't on the top floor, but you go downstairs and then you go down another set of stairs to go to where the Beethoven frieze is. So I was on the floor that is before you go to the Beethoven frieze, but actually when you go down into where the Beethoven frieze is, which was painted by Gustav Klimt, the wall where the frieze is actually ran round the other side of the wall where I was. So the work was also in response to the frieze, which is also about chaos, which is typhus, is chaos, but also life and hope as well, in a way. The work that I created was in response to my grandmother's death. So in Sepit Vita Nova is a new life is beginning, here begins a new life, which is also from a piece of work that Aubrey Beardsley did. And we made 3 rooms, and because the gallery space is semi-underground and there's only some small windows, we decided to make it underground as well. So we played a lot with shadows and light. That was mainly also because when my grandmother was dying, I was the person that was sitting up with her during the night time. In what is not silent, it's not silent at night, and also the shadows and the light is very, very different, and the time span is completely different. So I was trying to create that, but it was also this idea of, I suppose, an ancient way of being underground, and also something to do with tombs as well. That whole thing of being underground in something. So like you'd gone into another world, really, in a way, because at night time also it is another world. It's very, very different, especially if you're on your own in it, experiencing it in a certain situation. So one of the pieces was called Chaos, and it was, how do you make art in chaos and when someone else is dying? And that wasn't only because of the situation I was going through, but artists universally are often creating artworks in times of chaos. With all the things that are going on at the moment, there will be artists creating work, and work will come out of that chaos as well.
I think that the aspect of the themes of death and like blood ties run through a lot of your installation work, the work in general that you build on it. And you've just mentioned the obviously strong tie to your grandmother and her passing. Thinking about the way in which you came to do art and went to art college, these are things that in the Romani community, if you come from a very traditional family, it isn't very well known for females to have a shot at education like you did, especially at the time in which you did. Something I relate to myself, going to university, being the only person in your family to do that is difficult. Could you speak to how the women in your family has inspired you on your path through education and through art?
Well, my grandmother was quite an unusual person, very strong, quite a small person, but very powerful. You wouldn't want to get on the wrong side of her. The other thing is she was not usual in any way. She had my mother, and she was not married, which at the time in the 40s, to be an unmarried mother and to be a gypsy, a Romani person, was a double lot of problems for her, really. But she was very strong and very determined. She met my grandfather, who was an amazing man, and both of them had a very difficult time because of the situation they were in because of that. And if we talk about stereotypes, I did come from a family where I was the eldest, I'm female, and so therefore there were 2 roles that were going to happen to me. I was either going to stay at home and look after everyone else, and not have any life for myself, or I was going to marry someone that everyone else wanted me to marry. And I was like, that is not happening. No way is that happening to me. So I decided to go to college, which was not easy because as I've said, I'm the eldest of 5. I was the only one who actually finished any proper schooling. And I went for my interview. They didn't really want to give me a place, but I almost begged them to give me a place, and they did. And I suppose the rest is history. But, you know, between my grandmother, who created a space for us, and she insisted that I spend one day, evening a week with her so I could get my work done for college, because it wasn't easy at home. And my great uncle Eddie, who was also one of my grandmother's brothers, who was gay. He was living with the same-sex partner from when I was a small child. So I had these two very independent, strong-minded people who encouraged me to be the person that I am. And I also thought, as I was getting older, if they can do what they've done against everything they had going against them, because it was so hard for them. I mean, John talked about it the other day. People wouldn't give you water. You had to ask for water for the horses in order to get water for yourself. And they lived roadside, and it was not easy at all. If they could do what they did, then it was going to be easy for me to do whatever I wanted to do. So yeah, that's that bit of the story.
It's interesting how we can have these inspirations in our life that are not what people think. I think there's an assumption that if you're from the community, you're the only one that's doing this. You know, like you're brand new in it. But I think there's been radicalisation in the Romani community in many forms, and I think that's examples of stepping out of what is known in terms of stereotypes and traditions, and I think that's a really great example of strong people, the strongest people, I believe, the ones that step away from what is known without fear of judgment. I really feel that your work, Delaine, speaks truly to your soul and who you are. But could you speak about the sort of symbols that you use in your work, the imagery? Are there any similarities that you carry on throughout your work, or do you actively choose to seek out new symbols and patterns as work goes on?
Well, I see the whole work as being one big piece, and even the wall that's down in the unfairground at the moment. The big characters are a morphine of different characters that I've created over time. So they are, it's all part of the same narrative in a way, it just changes. And some of the imagery goes back quite a long way that you'll see on the work. Some of it just comes out of my head. I don't know sometimes where it comes from. I just feel like I'm drawn to produce something. So if I take the wall as an example, because it's here and everyone can see it, it's actually the basis of it is from 2 embroideries that I did about coming up for 20 years ago, and then it's got these new bits and pieces in it. There are horses in it, of course. But maybe in a different way. So one of the characters is actually from a photograph of me from a performance in a film we made, and it's got like a horse head, which I actually made out of fabric, but it's stuffed with, it's made out of this cotton organdy fabric that you can see through, and it was stuffed with hay. And in the performance, I was actually had the horse head on. So my fellow performer, Hera S. Santos, who I work with a lot, in the film spends a lot of time sort of guiding me. And the idea of that was this thing about trusting somebody else to be able to care for you and take you to a good place, and being able to give that trust to somebody else. So that's that was that part of that in that way. And then the other characters are just an assimilation of different things. So if you look at my work like Witch Hunt, which is quite an old piece now from about 2008, 2009, you will see some of the bits in these figures that are an accumulation of different, they're like the exquisite corpse type thing, you know, they've got like a different head, different body, different legs.
The use of fabrics in your work is definitely a prominent feature as your practice has evolved and grown, including how you dress yourself. What sort of active decisions do you make in fabrics or patterns in clothing? How do you decide what's important to present, and how important is it to use your hands in creating the pieces?
Well, I suppose it originates in the fact that when I was growing up, my parents used to dress me and my sister, even though there's 2 years between us, they used to dress us the same. They used to have clothes made for us and they used to send off for clothes. Then as I got older, I started to do my own thing. I wasn't old enough to be involved in punk, and I certainly wasn't allowed to go out, but I was really interested in it, and polystyrene from X-Ray Specs was a massive influence on me. So I started making my own clothes, getting clothes from second-hand shops and jumble sales, which jumble sales in particular I used to go to with my nana, my Uncle Eddie, and because he loved films and film stars, he would help me find the most amazing things to wear as well. Then I went to art school and I did textiles, so I was always interested in fabric and motifs and what it meant and how certain things, if you dress in a certain way also, what messages that carries, because there's a lot of messaging. But then also my clothing has just developed over time, so I get most of my things made. I do have the odd vintage thing like this that I wear till it falls to pieces. The rest of it is hand painted, things we make ourselves, or now, is Lincoln here? Or has he disappeared? Lincoln's introduced me to Mitzi and Kim, who have got a place in Brighton, and I can give Kim a drawing of something and she'll make it for me. So most of the costumes now are made, and most of my clothing is handmade, so it's sort of made to order really.
I feel like that resourcefulness that you have from a young age, like you said, you know, going to jumble shops, and that's I think an aspect of survival for many Romany families, even with my family, it was a traditional thing. Every time the jumble fair was on, we'd go, or every Sunday we'd know when the old clothes was going to be chucked into the skip, so we could go through the skip and like recycling, reusing. There's a big aspect of Romany culture, and you've taken that into a very creative space, which I think is very unique. And it's something that I would be brave enough to say that no artist has done within the Roma communities in terms of how you use your clothing and textiles in work. But are there any artists that you do draw inspiration from specifically?
Well, most of the art, I mean, as I said, polystyrene was a huge influence on me, not just because of what she looked like, but also I remember when I first heard Identity as a record, it was the first time I thought someone was talking about how I felt to be in the world. And so that was a huge, so music was a massive influence on me. And then when it comes to art, I suppose it was quite difficult because there wasn't, there are some books about like different Roma artists. At the time there wasn't, so I took great inspiration from Black American artists. And one of my favourite artists is Betty Saar. And I don't know if anyone knows Betty Saar's work, but she did all this work around the revenge of Aunt Jemima. So there was this character that was in advertisements, but there are also products made, and it was this character called Aunt Jemima. And she would take these Aunt Jemima figures, and she would give them a machine gun, or like she took a bottle that was Aunt Jemima and she turned it into a Molotov cocktail. So if you look down on the wall in the Fairground, you'll see Zagornosaurus as a Molotov cocktail, and that's in homage to Betty Saar. So yeah, I mean, that's where I would say most of my influences in a way would come from, because there wasn't really anyone else for me to look at, and it just felt very empowering to see, but also to take really what is a negative and turn it into a positive. So that's also what I did before we did the first Roma Pavilion in Venice Biennale in 2007. I'd done a whole range of work in 2005, and it was called Meet Your Neighbours, and that was taken from the Sun newspaper headline when there were the campaigns, political campaigns, in a general election, of course, like we're just having at the moment. And I took that and made it into work, and there was a book made in order for us to apply to get a space for Venice Biennale in 2007. And the book was called Meet Your Neighbours, after my piece of work. So we actually got the first Roma Pavilion ever at Venice Biennale, and it was taking something very negative and twisting it around and throwing it back. So yeah, so there's a you can take this stuff and turn it around.
Yes, that is worth a pat. Going on from your talking about the imagery in your mural at the Fairground, which I encourage you to see. There are also representations in that are based on current affairs, or sort of the current state of the world. I believe you talking to me about that mural being representative of the sort of like water shortages, or the sort of state of the quality of water in the world. Do you want to speak more to how that influences?
Well, that was a piece I did for Tate Liverpool for a show called Radical Landscapes. I did a piece called Rinkini Pani, which is Romany for beautiful water. And that's about two things: rising sea levels and lack of water for everyone, basically. Like, actually, if you were just here, there wasn't all of this infrastructure around. How do you get water? Where is it? I mean, it's not that easy to be able to just find that basic thing. And for most people in an everyday situation, a lot of people in the world, it's a massive thing to have to try and get your hands on. And without it, we can't go for a long time without water. Food we can, but without water we're absolutely, we're not in a good state. So yeah, so that's what that piece of work was about.
We've had, through this conversation, we've had a really good sense of, I really think I've dug deep in terms of the representation of your work and the imagery of your work, what you use. But on to sort of feeling, like, how are you feeling about being here at Atchin Tan with your mural at the Fairground, and what have been your sort of takeaways from this experience as we draw sort of closer and closer to the end of Glastonbury?
Well, firstly, I'd like to thank Sam Haggerty, who runs the Fairgrounds, because he's also given me a space. I don't have a studio, so in the past times, Sam's given me somewhere to work at the space that they have in Findon, which has been quite amazing to get things done. Some of the work that I've got in Glasgow at the moment, that's been on show for Glasgow International at Tramway, is thanks to Sam giving me the space to work in. I mean, this is the third year now of the Atchin Tan, so yeah, I mean, it's great to be here, be with other people, have conversations, and just spend some time together as well as the work, because obviously we're all here and we make the work while we're here, so it's quite an intensive time. And already when you get here, there's been loads of people working to create the infrastructure in order for you to be able to do what you do as well. But yeah, it's a good energy.
Well, yes, well, shout out to Delaine. Her work is at our fairgrounds. Please check it out if you haven't already. And the exhibition that has been nominated for Turner Prize Award will be exhibiting at the Tate Britain in September. Please check that out. Delaine, is there any other things that we should be looking out for in seeing your work?
A couple of things. I've got a show in Brighton coming up in September at John Marchant's Gallery, which is called Rags of Evidence, which is a photographic show, which is with Tara Darby, who I've worked with for over 20 years. And I've got another show in October at Yamamoto Keikura Show, which is in the East End of London, which is the Archipelago on Fire, which has just been actually in France, which will be coming back over to the UK. So yeah, and various other things. Sometimes I can't think, there's too many things going on all the time.
Well, I can say for myself that it's been an honour to talk to you today. You have inspired a lot of my creative practice, and I really look forward to seeing your exhibition at Tate Britain and how that goes. And again, let's just give a round of applause to Delaine and a big congratulations for that nomination.